Tizku L'Shayim Rabot, Rabbi Tawil here. In this video, we're going to go through the Seder Leil Rosh Hashanah, the order of symbolic and traditional foods commonly known as the simanim, which we adorn our tables with on the night of Rosh Hashanah. In this video, we'll talk about which foods you need, in what order you should be eating them, and other customs and traditions that are associated with the simanim of Rosh Hashanah. Before we begin, let's just give a brief introduction to where this tradition comes from. The Gemara in multiple places, one of which is the Gemara Masechet Horayot Daf Bet Amud Aleph, discusses the idea of simanim. It says that we crown a king always by a ma'ayan, a spring, in order to symbolize that just as the spring flows, so too the kingdom of the new king should be mitmashech, should flow and be everlasting. From here, Abaye says, simana miltahi, that a siman, an omen or symbolic act, has an impact and significance. Therefore, he says, a person should always be accustomed to having certain foods on their table which are a siman tov. Some of which, because their names indicate something positive, we can make a play on words. In other cases, because the food tastes good and sweet, and in still others, because they grow fast and that our year should be one of speedy growth. We look at this Seder, and sometimes we associate it with a Seder similar to Pesach, but there are some notable differences. This is a Seder which goes back, albeit to a very ancient time, about 1700 years in the Gemara, as we noted, but it is only a custom, it is a tradition. It is not an obligation, something which is mandatory to eat each of these foods. In fact, one Gemara says that it's only to see these foods. Therefore, as long as one brings the food onto the table and points it out and says the prayer, that is sufficient. They do not have to eat each and every single food if they don't wish to do so. It is not like matzah and maror. As long as one points it out and says the prayer, that is enough. Additionally, when we say that something is a siman, it's an omen, it doesn't mean that we are manipulating Hashem or changing our fortunes. It is a way to indicate a prayer to Hashem, and it is something that should be recognized by us, that we have to do more in the upcoming year in order to merit a Shana Tova. Therefore, our rabbis attached to each food a Yehi Ratzon, a prayer that we recite for Hashem to grant us good in the upcoming year, but to remind us also that we need to do our best to ensure that the upcoming year will be a successful one. Let us now begin by detailing the order of events on the night of Rosh Hashanah. One will come home from Bet Knesset and have their family around the table and begin with Kiddush. At this point, there are different traditions, and I should note that I'm going to be following the traditions of the Syrian Aleppo Jewry and based upon the Mahzor Shalom Yerushalayim. However, over the hundreds of years that this tradition has been kept, there are many different sects of Jews who celebrate this tradition differently. And so if you have a different custom than the one that I'm saying, and it's a strong custom based on sources, feel free to continue to observe it. I will at times point out some different customs that exist within our community. The first of which is, should we do the simanim before Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, or after making the beracha of Hamotzi on the bread? There are some who perform Hamotzi after doing the simanim. If this is your custom, you must make sure to say Borei Pri Ha'etz and Borei Pri Ha'adama when appropriate on the different foods that we will point out. And in addition to that, be sure not to eat a kazayit, an ounce of each food, so as not to enter into a safek of whether you should make beracha aharona or if the birkat hamazon later in the meal will cover it. Most have the tradition after Kiddush to make Hamotzi lechem min haaretz and then to incorporate the simanim as part of the meal. Let's begin with the first food that a person should take. The first food that is mentioned in the Shalom Yerushalayim Mahzor is the apple. This is a debated procedure because we also have on the table dates and pomegranates. Dates and pomegranates are fruits of the land of Eretz Yisrael, the Shiv'at HaMinim. And typically the halacha is that Shiv'at HaMinim take priority over other fruits. which is why many people have the tradition to do the date first. However, our custom is to prioritize the apple based on its Kabbalistic significance and can be justified according to halacha, since the Rambam holds chaviv adif, whichever is the most beloved food on the table can take priority. And because the apple symbolizes a sweet new year, many have the custom to do it first. So we will take the apple and we will then dip it in something sweet to symbolize a shana tova umetuka, as the Yehiratzon will say. Here there are also different customs. Many have the custom to dip into honey, while others dip into sugar. Our tradition is to dip into sugar, since sugar is white, it represents purity and atonement. And also, honey is typically Kabbalistically associated with midat hadin, the trait of judgment. Hence, we always dip into sugar, and the bread as well into sugar. If your tradition is honey, that is also acceptable. In this situation, the person will dip the apple, and now they will make the beracha of boreh peri ha'etz. Because even though we've had the bread, fruit is not typically part of the meal, we'll make the beracha of boreh peri ha'etz. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam boreh peri ha'etz. Very sweet. After making boreh peri ha'etz, we're going to take another whole apple to then make the Yehiratzon. The reason why we do this is because we do not say the Yehiratzon of a prayer asking Hashem for something before we make our own beracha thanking Hashem. If we were to make the Yehiratzon after the beracha, it would be an interruption. So first make boreh peri ha'etz and eat the apple, then take another apple, dip it again, and recite the Yehiratzon of Shana Tova Umetuka. After the apple, one can continue to follow the procedure in the mahzor. After the apple comes the keret, the leek, which in the form I have here is like an edge, right? But others make it in different ways. The beracha, the Yehiratzon I should say, is yikartu oivenu besorenu. Keret, yikartu, to cut off our enemies. And in here one should not only have our physical enemies, but also our spiritual and internal enemies as well. After the leek, one moves to the Swiss chard. The Swiss chard is this spinachy food as well, called the silit, or silka in Aramaic. The Yehiratzon being, Istalku oivenu v'sorenu, Hashem should remove our enemies and those who seek our evil doing. After this, one would follow with the date. Be sure if you have dates such as this to open them up and check them for bugs so that one does not violate eating bugs. And then they would make the Yehiratzon, Yitammu oivenu v'sorenu, v'chol mevakshei ra'atenu, that Hashem should destroy and end our enemies and those who seek our ill will. After that, we go to the kera. The kera is the gourd, or in this one, the hilu, which is a squash-like vegetable that is candied over here. Others have the custom to fry it. However you prepare it is acceptable. And the kera, kufresh alif, we recite the Yehiratzon, shetikra roa gezar dinenu, Hashem should rip up, kufresh ayin, any evil decrees against us, v'yikareu lefanecha zechuyotenu, and Hashem should read out loud all of our merits. The next comes the rubiyah. Rubiyah is black-eyed peas, looks something like this. Many have the custom to cook it with meat in some kind of a red sauce. And the rubiyah also has a play on words for its Yehiratzon. She'yirbu zechuyotenu kirubiyah. Hashem should make abundant our merits like rubiyah, which has the word rov, to be abundant. Next comes the pomegranate, the rimon. And here we capitalize on the plethora of seeds that a rimon would have. And we say, Yirbu zechuyotenu karimon, that our merits should be abundant like a pomegranate. Finally, we close with the tongue. Here we have many different customs. Many put a Rosh keves, the head of a lamb, or a Rosh dag, the head of a fish. The reason is because we're going to say Shiyeh lerosh velo lizanav. We should be the head and not the tail. Many bring the Rosh keves also to symbolize Akedat Yitzhak, the binding of Yitzhak as a korban, which we remember on Rosh Hashanah. And as I mentioned, Shiyeh lerosh velo lizanav is the Yehiratzon that we make. That completes all of the different foods in the simanim. This is a very festive night and an opportunity for us to involve the children, to eat all together these foods, and to talk about how we're going to make the upcoming year a great one. As I mentioned, many have different customs. This is one version, and there are different variations within it. But the most important thing is not to get angry, not to have debate or mahloket on Rosh Hashanah. The greatest siman that a person can have is being happy and joyous on Rosh Hashanah, that they should have a joyful year. I wish everybody a tizku b'shanim rabot, ne'imot v'tovot, and a shana tova u'metuka.